Welcome to Career Coffee Chat Live, my friends. I'm your host, Aaron Urban. It might even surprise you to learn that influence is generated without positional power has the greatest potential for impact. Let me say that again because I know when I read that from Vivian Blade, our star guest today, I was like, what? Wait a minute. You mean influence generated without positional power has the greatest potential for impact? That's very interesting. This is interesting for you. Come on in and join us for a great conversation. Don't be shy. Say hi. Say where you're from. I'd love to welcome you to the show. And most importantly, hear what you have to say as far as influence in your realm, your industry, and what you're seeing. What are your struggles? Today, we're discussing how to scale your influence for more credibility and impact with our rock star guest, Vivian Blade. Because on any given day, you're a negotiator, persuader, conciliator, and maybe even a mediator, my friends. And it's a little known fact that your success has less to do, in fact, with your on the job experience in your role and more to do with those unscripted moments at work. How well do you negotiate? Are you an active listener? Can you influence a conversation? How do you make people feel? And in these days, inclusivity, are you making sure you're having collaborative conversations? Now, Vivian will share her insights based on her best selling book, Influence, which I'm really excited about. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel at Coachy Urban and be the first to know about upcoming shows just like this one. Our rock star guest, Vivian Blade, is recognized as one of Engagedly's top 100 HR influencers. She's a sought after leadership expert and thought leader. She works with the world's top brands, equipping leaders to build better, more resilient workforces, equipped leaders to build and to equip leaders to thrive in spite of insurmountable change and struggle in the workforce and insurmountable odds. Vivian's impact is felt as a frequent keynote speaker and delivering transformative leadership development programs, executive coaching, and corporate consulting. Now, without further ado, I'd love to welcome Vivian Blade to the show. Vivian, it's great to see you. Thank you for being with
Hi,
us.
Aaron. Hi, great
Yeah,
to be with you. Thanks so much for
yeah,
having me today.
absolutely. I had to pause halfway through your bio because it wouldn't show me the rest of the content. So I was like, I have to
Oh,
write this up.
you did a great job. You did a great job.
So we have someone tuning in from Saudi Arabia. Great to see you, Hassan. He says, I work in the oil and gas industry. So great to see you. Thanks you for tuning in. And today I'm really excited again to talk about your best selling book, Influence. Now, you mentioned ATD was doing a soft skills series and they reached out to you. By the way, that's how much influence Vivian has. They reached out to her to do a book. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So I've done a lot of work with ATD, the Association for Talent Development, over the years and in fact, a lot in their career development space,
Mhm.
giving a lot of knowledge and encouragement to professionals in advancing their careers and speaking at their conferences. So when they were putting together a soft skills series of books, they reached out to me to be one of the authors for that series. And so one of the topics was influence. And I selected that topic because I had just been doing some work and research and a presentation for a women's conference on how to be more influential. And I thought this is the ripe opportunity to really get more into this and to bring more insight into how influence really works to
Mhm.
professionals to help them in their careers.
Yeah, that's fantastic. What's interesting is, as you well know, most people, when they think of influence and credibility, they're thinking of the types of skills and expertise that they bring to the table as a part of their quote unquote role. And as you well know, it's not just about what you do day in and day out. It's not necessarily on your job description. Those key factors that propel you forward, both in your career and scale your influence, to use your words.
Mm-hmm.
Now, any other
Right.
tidbits that you'd like to share with us before we launch into your process? Because I think there's a five-part system to the scale model. I'm really excited to talk about that. Anything else you'd like to share with folks tuning in either now or later around what the catalyst was? Because I know you're working on this for, scaling influence for women leaders, but there's something going on behind that. So why did that
Mm-hmm.
come to mind, and why were you working on that for the conference?
Yeah. I saw the opportunity because so many professionals, women in so many instances, deal with imposter syndrome. A lot of times we hear that, especially for that community. But I realized that a lot of professionals are struggling with that and trying to figure out, much like you do in helping them every day, with figuring out, how do I advance my career? What do I do? What do I do that's different? And so influence helps to build on some of my earlier work, the Fuel Forward book, that tells you how to really navigate a corporate career and some of those unwritten rules. And so, how do you build your influence to help you to be successful? So, I know for myself, across the course of my career, that's something that's been an opportunity for me, things that I've struggled with and had to figure out. So, I looked at, what has my experience been? What have I learned? As I did my research, what did I find when people are influential, both very prominent influential people that we see, or people that are not even as prominent, people who are influential more in the shadows? What are some of the principles that come out around that? What makes people influential? What makes it work? What is this influence thing all about? And I love part of your introduction just now talked about, it's not just what we do in terms of the expertise that we bring to the table through our work, though that is extremely important because we build credibility. And foundationally, if we're going to advance in our career, we know that we have to contribute strong. So building that expertise, being able to execute, our high levels of performance are all important for us, but it is more than that. And so a mantra that I use around influence is that influence is more about how we live than what we do.
Interesting.
Influence is more about how we live than what we do. So what I want people to think about is that we want to think about being more influential as individuals. And I often, when I do workshops and keynotes around this work, I ask people to think about, are you an influencer or are you influential? And I
What's the
ask that
difference?
question. Yeah, it's a little bit of a trick question
Yeah.
because I throw that out before we really talk a lot about what being influential is. And people will ask, well, what's the difference? I said, well, let me just get what your thoughts are initially. So I want your audience to think about for a moment, are you an influencer or are you influential? And let's talk about what the difference is for a minute, and then it'll make a little bit more sense as we get into what the scale framework and those 5 core principles are all about. So when we influence, oftentimes we're trying to figure out, we may be in a meeting, we need somebody to go with our opinion, come along on our side of thinking, or to make a decision. It may be we're trying to figure out where to go for dinner and we have a preference and we want our spouse or our kids or whoever we're with, our friends, to go with our choice. So we find ourselves in a position to influence all the time. And we're mediator, we're conciliator, we're a persuader. And we often think of influence as, when I need to influence someone, what are the tools that I can pull out of my toolkit that will help me to influence someone, pull them onto my side? And we can talk about some of the mistakes people make too around that if you'd like. But what I want people to think about is that influence is really a longer term game. And what our goal is to find ways to be more influential, not just to be influencers. And when we can have a deeper influence, when people think of us and who we are, what we represent, they think of us in terms of, that person has influence because of how they live, how they engage and interact with people each and every day, not just the tactics they use and what they do. So there are times when we are both influencers and we are influential, because we do need those tools. They're important for us to, use those tools when we need them. If we can stack that on top of a foundation of being an influential person and having that reputation and that respect, then we are all that much more effective and impactful in our careers and in the work that we do.
That's very insightful. Thank you for sharing that, Vivian. I'd love for
Mhm.
any of you tuning in either now or watching the replay later to let me know. Do you feel like you're more influential or an influencer? Because someone who's an influencer, based on what you share, Vivian, it sounds like that's a situational, almost like
Mhm.
persona that we'll put in, or some tools or tactics that we'll deploy to get our way
Mhm. Yeah.
sometimes, but for
Yeah.
people to go along with this or perhaps see where we're coming from to move forward on a project or even decide where you want to go out for dinner, to your point. But being influential is how you are. And that can be closely linked
That's
oftentimes to
right.
executive presence or how you're showing up in general.
Absolutely.
So that's a whole different ballgame and it goes
Mhm.
much deeper.
That's
Um,
right.
some people might struggle, and let me know in the chat if that resonates with you. Those of you tuning in either now or watching the replay later, some people don't feel like they're empowered. Some people don't feel like they have impact or that their actions really matter or their thoughts matter or what they do matters. And I'd love for people to conceptualize for a moment that actually all of us have a tremendous amount of impact. In fact, the most
Mhm.
reserved individual has been proven to impact over 20,000 people in their lifetime. Now, this is someone who, when we went into lockdown, was like, yay, I want to go out. Right?
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
will impact over 20,000 people. So just imagine for a moment how many people you actually impact. And I think, Vivian, perhaps what you're getting at here is a difference between just being impactful irresponsibly, perhaps, and being influential is the intent
Mhm.
and the strategy and the focus by which you apply that inherent impact you already have, just being a little bit more mindful about it.
Absolutely. Our intention is so important. And as we think about our overall reputation and the executive presence that you mentioned, how we show up each and every day, people are going to make decisions about who we are and what we represent based on how we show up and how we engage and how we are intentional about our respect for the other person
Mhm.
as well. And so what you'll see as we get into the principles is that we're heavily focused on other people. When we're trying to become influential, very heavily focused on other people. So love the point that you made there. Absolutely. Hmm.
Fantastic. Well, I'd love to learn more about this model, the scale model, and what that involves and how our listeners can apply that model.
Yeah. Yeah. If you don't mind, I'd like to start a little bit by talking about some of the mistakes because that will lead into really helping to illuminate. It builds on some of the conversation that we've already been having, and I think will also illuminate some of the principles as I begin to talk about them. So,
Mhm.
in my research, I found that there were three core mistakes that people make when they are trying to influence other people. One is that they mistake manipulation for influence. So
Mm.
just as we were talking about a little bit, but let's take it to the extreme. I remember early on when I was in my business, had started my business, and I was trying to figure out how am I going to market. I was trying to learn and find partners and resources to support me. And I had somebody who reached out to me at the right time. You know how that is.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
I had said, okay, I'm going to work with you. But what happened? So they influenced me by their message, by their what they had to sell to me at that point, by their approach, but they did not deliver. So
Mm.
they manipulated me into a relationship of of them marketing for me, but they did not deliver on that at all. I had a hard time getting in touch with them and getting them to fill. It wasn't even a whole lot of money,
Mhm.
but it left a really bad taste in my mouth, and certainly was not going to recommend them to anybody else.
Mhm. No,
So,
absolutely not.
yeah, so manipulation. A
Yeah, we
second mistake. Oh, go ahead.
sorry, just had somebody pop in from LinkedIn. Lisa M. Johnson popped in. She says, thanks to a career for which I have lots of position, passion, and developed trust, I have come to have influence what she does. I'd love to be more of an influencer. I need to work towards that. She also says, hi, Vivian. So,
Hello, Lisa. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you.
absolutely.
Great. Excellent. Um, so, yeah, and Lisa is influential. Absolutely. So let's talk about the second mistake where people believe that influence is instant. So that goes back to the when I need to pull something out of my toolkit,
Mhm.
and I'm trying to influence related to that. Who are my coffee drinkers out there? And I have a question for you. So, do you prefer instant coffee or, okay, so Aaron, this is a question for you too. Oh, instant coffee, or do you love that fresh brewed coffee that takes some time for those coffee beans to brew?
Mhm.
You smell that aroma, and all that's going on. Is that your preference? That slow
Absolutely.
brewed.
Yeah.
So
I'm a
yeah,
coffee snob.
yeah, influence is much the same way. I remember when I was growing up, our parents used to use I can't even remember what the brand was called, but the instant coffee and the
Soldiers,
instant
maybe.
tea, maybe full, those crystals they used to advertise, the
Oh,
crystals, whatever, and you pour that in and stir, and even instant tea, doesn't have that same flavor. And so a lot of people think that influence is instant, and just as long as I can, use a tool, I can persuade or get somebody to go along with me.
mhm.
And then the third key mistake people make is they treat influence as a transaction. Once the deal is done, if I get somebody to go my way, my job is done. Right. Wash my hands and move on.
Move on.
But yeah, it's you want to have much deeper influence than that. It's a much longer term game. So
And good luck. You do that
yeah.
once.
Yes.
You get to do
Right.
that once, and after that, people then know. So Gerald's tuning
That's
in. Great
right.
to see you, Gerald. He says to be influential, it helps to adopt the attitude. I have so many good ideas. I can spare a few. That's fantastic, Gerald. Do you want it done, or do you want it with your name on it? That's the difference. Well, stay tuned to this
Yeah.
space, Gerald. I like where you're coming from, and you sounds like you have some generosity around your ideation, and you might not necessarily need to have your name on it and still get the same reward.
Yeah.
That's my
And
offering for you.
And what you'll see as we build into these principles, and I'm going to talk to you now about what the scale framework is and some actions that you can take around that to help you to scale your influence for greater credibility, for greater respect, and for greater impact. Scale is an acronym for the framework to scale your influence, and the S is for social capital, the C
Mhm.
is for courage, A is authenticity, L is leaning in with passion, and the E is engaging a diverse and inclusive workplace community. And so let's get into each of these. And I've found that these were the core success factors when I looked at examples of influence. Social capital. Social capital is all about the investments that we make in building relationships. We are selfless in building those relationships. What can I do for you versus, I like to think of the Janet Jackson song, What Have You Done For Me Lately? Ooh, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
yeah,
right.
yeah.
Yeah. So oftentimes we're looking at, well, what have you done for me lately?
Mm.
And so we're not looking for anything in return. We're selfless. So our action item is selflessly add value in the relationship.
Can I add
And
on to that, Vivian?
yeah, mm-hmm,
So I like where you're going with that, and you're absolutely correct. The intent and the what you put out there is a pay it forward attitude, if you will. So you're
yes,
selflessly adding value, because quite frankly, people can smell out those people who are not doing that. Like I said, you might
mm-hmm,
get one chance, and then after that, they know better.
yeah,
And two, I feel like not just women, but people in general don't necessarily aren't as intentional around strategic relationships and leveraging those. Men do this a little bit more naturally than women do. Oftentimes, what we don't necessarily do is we're not as intentional about. building and leveraging those relationships. And those are not to be confused with using. I
Mm-hmm.
might be talking about this a little bit later in your scale model. I just want to put that out there because oftentimes we're saying, oh, well, we just pay it for, we pay for it. Yes, yes, and
Mm-hmm.
right. And
Right.
then there's the strategic component to it as well,
That's right.
particularly for those people moving into leadership. And even if you're not.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Because ultimately, what that does for you, to your point, it builds alliances
Mm-hmm.
and advocates that you need for your career advancement.
Yes,
So when we invest in building relationships and getting to know people on a personal, individual level, and really planting those seeds with a real intention to want to know the individual first,
mm-hmm.
then that really begins to build their interest in us, know that they know that we really care about them. And we begin to grow our influence from that. Sometimes, and I think you mentioned this a little bit earlier too, Aaron, that sometimes people are not sure what they bring to the table. You know,
Mm-hmm.
whether they look at their experience, their skill set. Well, what do I have to offer? How do I add value? Because your action item is to selflessly add value into the relationship. What can I do that can help you? And again, we know that karma is going to come back to us. You know, that's going to come back to us in return. So I developed a resource called a personal value inventory tool
Hmm.
so that people can go through that. And it really is just a thought process and taking you through thinking about, you know, what skills do I have? What experiences do I have? What about my network? You know, what is it that I bring to the table that I can offer that is a value that would be helpful for someone? And
Right.
so, if you're struggling to think about what that might be, or when you're thinking about different individuals that you might connect with, um, that might be a helpful resource for people.
That's fantastic. And can
So,
they find that on your website at vivianblade.com?
if you go to
Mm-hmm.
influencewithscale.com, so
Okay.
influencewithscale.com, you can get access to the resources there. Then you'll also find information about that at vivianblade.com as well. So, yeah, so that's fine to go there. So, let's talk about courage a little bit. And so, courage is the second influence principle. And courage says, well, you know, sometimes I may not feel very much like an influencer on the inside, or I may have situations that I walk into where I may not have the authority, where they may be tense situations. If I'm a human resources
Mm-hmm.
professional and I have to have a tough conversation, maybe, or a leader. And so and the other thing I say, especially to HR professionals sometimes, where sometimes they don't necessarily have the influential voice at the table that they really deserve, and where the organization needs their voice at the table, they don't necessarily always have it. So sometimes it takes courage for us to step into the challenge, and that really is our action item, is to embrace the challenge, step into that challenge,
Mm-hmm.
and find the confidence within ourselves. So if we're building relationships, one, and we're doing that personal value inventory to know what we bring to the table, then we can leverage that to then have the courage to embrace the challenges when we need to.
That's very interesting. I think too. I love the personal value inventory. To go back that one step, and also feel a lot of people don't necessarily connect to their innate talents and gifts as readily as their skills that they develop because they develop, they're
Mm-hmm.
more tangible, that sort of thing. Oftentimes, our innate talents and gifts are not as easily expressed because they're natural. We don't have to think about them. And because we don't have to think about them, I encourage you to lean on those individuals who know you well and will also give you good, candid feedback, help you discover where you shine because chances are that may not be as obvious to you, and or pay attention to those instances where someone has said, wow, you do such and such so easily. I wish I could do that too. That's a key that might be an area of your innate talent. And being able to leverage that throughout your development and your professional growth, your leadership acumen, and through the scale model, I think is tremendous.
Hmm. Yeah, that really is a great point. And that leads me right into the next principle, which is authenticity.
Mm.
Talking about knowing yourself and getting feedback and learning about yourself. So authenticity, which is the third influence with scale principle, is about really leaning in and showing up as our authentic selves. And
Mhm.
there are a few things that I want to touch on here. So, in our authenticity, we can't be authentic if we don't know who we are. So, authenticity begins with using assessments, getting that feedback, like you said, talking to someone who knows you, who sees you in your day to day, doing a strengths finder or a disc assessment. There are so many opportunities for that insight. But to be authentic, and people want you to be authentic. People can tell when you are being artificial,
That's
really.
right.
Hmm. They can tell. And so your action item is to learn to be adaptable. Excuse me, to learn to be adaptable, not artificial. And we can only do that if we know ourselves well. And the other thing that we need to do is make sure that we show up with a dose of humility also when we are coming in as our authentic selves. So, authenticity is really important. The other thing I want to mention about authenticity is, there's a debate about, do I come people receiving me as I am. And that whole adaptability piece is wrapped around the fact that, let's say that if you know your disc profile, you've done that assessment, and your tendency to address challenges and problems is more of a high D, we'll say very direct. Well, every situation doesn't call for you to be very direct. And one analogy I like to use is every situation doesn't call for a person to be a bull in a china shop. Oh, if that's your tendency. So you have to read the situation. You have to be good at understanding, and emotional intelligence comes along in here too. So you have to be good at being able to see where I am, where are my emotions, how does that influence me, where are the other individuals, what's going on in the situation, and how do I need to engage and show up still in authentic ways and in a very professional way. Authenticity still means that if we want to be influential and have people respect us, we have to show that we have self respect and dignity and show up in professional ways as well. So
Right.
that's
It's
authenticity.
very interesting you mentioned that because I had an HR leader. She is she does have a seat at the table. And she was also sharing with me that she said, Aaron, she goes, I don't know what's going on. She goes, we're dealing with high school level interpersonal issues right now. Has everybody forgotten how to be professional while they were in
Mm-hmm.
isolation? And
Yeah.
what's really interesting is while I'm all for authenticity, there is a balance, as you mentioned, between
Mm-hmm.
the social requirement, the social contract, if you will. It's an
Yes.
unwritten contract that in the
Mm-hmm.
workplace that there is a certain amount of decorum that you will have
That's right.
in order to be
Mm-hmm.
considered credible. Right,
Right.
wrong, or indifferent. That's the
Yeah.
way it is in
It's
our
true.
society right now. And
Sure.
because of how we've evolved as a human, there's a really good reason why some of those components are in place. I mean, just imagine how much credence or how much would you rely on someone who is a leader who is very wishy-washy, very emotional, and perhaps makes impulsive and poor choices.
Mm-hmm.
Probably not high. So we want to show up in a way while yes is authentic and is also growing, right?
That's right.
So if we're going to be authentic, we're going to share something that we have learned, like a lesson learned, which I do quite frequently, showing that how we are growing from that is tremendous because it does several things. One, it allows us to connect to people at a much more deeper level. Um, If you're always winning, nobody can really relate to that,
Hmm.
right?
That's right.
And
That's
being
right.
more approachable is huge because it's not
Yes.
necessarily the star player who is the most influential per se in the room.
That's right. Yes. Yes. And when we talk about engaging a diverse and inclusive workplace community, we're going to be talking about that last statement that you just made as well. So, yeah, so absolutely. So we really have to think about the social construct that we're in. And when we know ourselves, I had a coaching client and we were doing assessments and really understanding more about who he was, and we were talking about this adaptability piece, and he said to me, thank you for letting me know, or basically giving me permission to not have to change myself, but learn more about how to adapt my approach
Right.
given the situation that I'm in and what is needed at that particular time.
Right.
So we're not asking you to change who you are, but to know who you are so that you know how to use that strength in who you are to bring out the best in yourself and in other people in your influence circle.
Hmm.
So well stated, Aaron.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
for sharing, Vivian, because I
Yeah.
love this model and it's
Good.
fantastic. So I'm excited to
Good.
know about the next step.
All right. So let's talk about the L, which is leaning in with passion. And so leaning in with passion is all about how we just, what fuels you every day? What gets you out of bed each and every day? Why are you here? And we know in today's work environment, professionals expect one, to be able to work for an employer where they can be doing meaningful work, connect to the passion in their lives, to their why,
Hmm.
and they expect their employers also to be good corporate citizens and to be have a meaningful purpose. Even if you are a for-profit company, you still can have good intentions around the customers and clients that you serve and how you give back and support the communities where you operate.
Hmm.
Employees demand that of you today. So if you want to retain employees, one, we have to be purposeful as organizations. As leaders, we need to be able to connect that purpose for each individual to what is important for them. How does your role matter here? How does it contribute to both this organization's purpose as connecting to what's important for you, and helping to make sure that we get people in the right seat? One of the tools that I love for this is the why discovery. The Why Institute developed the Why Discovery based on Simon Sinek's work. I don't know
I
if
know
you're,
that sounded familiar.
yeah, so a lot of people are familiar with Simon Sinek's TED Talk a few years ago and the work that he's done around Start with Why and Find Your Why. Leaders Eat Last. All of his work is based around really finding what drives us at our core
Mhm.
internally. And then we build on that with things like a DISC assessment or emotional intelligence that helps us to understand more about how that comes to life for us. But the why discovery is built around why we do what we do. And our operating system that builds on that is how we bring that to life, and then what it is that we ultimately deliver. What value do we ultimately bring to the world through our why? So my why is to contribute. I want to make sure, and it's so true that I try to serve and to help, and I'm invested in helping other people to become all that they can be in my coaching, in my speaking, in my consulting work, in my teaching. I teach, one of the reasons why I continue to teach at the university level today is because I want to invest in building some practical skills and growth and encouragement for the next generations of leaders who are coming into the workforce. So being able to contribute. So knowing your why and
Mhm.
tapping into that is going to help you to be more influential as people can feel it and they can see it in you.
Mhm. It also helps you understand where you need to be strategic and how you have that true north. Because oftentimes
Mm-hmm.
people will fall victim to the 3 to 5 year planning as far as their professional leadership growth development is concerned. And that's exactly the opposite of how we need to be planning. In fact, the brain isn't built even to do that. Looking to the future, knowing our true north allows us to get us that long-term plan and look at the
Right.
longer, the bigger picture. Maybe even putting ourselves in the future and looking back over
Yes.
our lives and asking ourselves, well, what do I really want to feel? And what actions promote that feeling for me? So if that feeling for you, Vivian, is I want to feel, joyful. And part of that joy is an action of me giving back to my community and empowering the next generation. And that's beautiful. But just being able to make that connection is incredibly empowering. It allows you to
Yes.
know where to show up, that connects to who you truly are and your inner brilliance.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And to the point you made, when I learned my why operating system, after going through the discovery and understanding that my why is contribute, my how is better way, and my what is mastery, it clicked because I had already created a tagline for my business. But I build better leaders and better workplaces. And my podcast is Better Leaders, Better Workplaces. And so it just all clicked for me. And it's like, I understand myself better, and now I can stand in that. And I bring solutions that are proven that people can trust, that I have investigated, much like my research here in
Right.
influence. So that's how I'm wired, and now I know how I can bring that to people each and every day.
That's fantastic.
Hmm.
That's really, really good.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right.
Absolutely.
Let's close this scale framework out
All
with
right.
the E, which is engaging a diverse and inclusive workplace community. And that is all about inclusion. It is bringing people together. How can we make sure that we build community within our organizations? If I'm
Mhm.
going to have influence, then I've got to be open. I've got to have a broad network of people who I am connecting with, who I care about, who I'm bringing in, who I'm inviting in, who I'm understanding, who understand me, who I'm reaching out to. So your action here is to unleash that community influence. You said earlier, Aaron, that you don't always have to be the person up front. And that's the whole point here. There's so much talent among the community. And when we can have people and help them to feel included, valued, important, like they matter, that we built social capital in the relationship there, we're going to put some of the people who are on our team out front, show that we've got an influential team. It's not just me, and that we're growing people, right? As leaders, we're investing in growing and developing others so that we have all the talent that our organization has can contribute to what we can do for our customers, our clients, our communities, build a great culture and a great workplace. So that's what the
Yeah.
E is all about.
That's fantastic, Vivian. Something came to mind when you were talking about when you first started introducing the E and that part of it, inclusion. And you talked a little bit about those people you connect with and that you have that rapport with, bringing them in. And I'm going to throw a little bit of a monkey wrench
Okay.
in the mix when we're talking about inclusion. Because of how we're wired as human beings through evolution, we're naturally gravitate to people that we can see the sameness in. That's not inclusive. It's just
Yep.
not. So
Yep.
how do we deal with that? Well, being okay and embracing that we will have different opinions and that we will have different points of view, and this person doesn't look like me or think like me, or perhaps I don't even get them, and I can make a create create a safe space for them to feel valued and acknowledged. That's the challenge. Because in an inclusive workforce, in a collaborative workforce, in a wildly diverse global workforce, we will interface with and need to be influential with in those individuals where we may not necessarily get them and they may not
Mm-hmm.
necessarily get us. So leaning into the first part of that scale model, as you mentioned, being authentic and also leaning into our EQ, creating a safe space where, yes, we may not necessarily agree, and I still value your opinion because the differences of opinion, the differences of perspectives is incredibly enriching for an organization that wants to be innovative and wants to be cutting edge.
You're so right. And that goes back to that humility piece. We
Mm-hmm.
have to get ourselves out of the way a little bit, take that ego out
Mm-hmm.
of the way. And so much of what gets in the way is that I want to feel comfortable, as you mentioned, our normal brain that wants to protect ourselves where we feel comfortable. I was just sharing with a coaching client of mine. We were talking about some upcoming events that my coaching client was going to be a part of, and I was sharing an example of how I was just with my husband, who is on the board of trustees for the college that we graduated from, Berea College. And and spouses often come, partners often come. We have different events, and then there are social events, and there are some people I know and are glad to see again. There are some new people in the mix. And what I try to do is just to be curious about people, have a genuine curiosity to just want to say hello. And so many of the other people are feeling like I do, not comfortable necessarily networking or meeting new people. And so, what can I do to help people feel a little bit more comfortable, a little more included, especially the people who are new to the group, to feel like they're seen? And so,
Right.
just wanting to be really curious about getting to know who they are and what they care about,
Mm-hmm.
and why they're here. So those are incredibly stimulating and interesting conversations that begins to build that social capital in those relationships.
Yes, absolutely.
Hmm.
And even maybe seeking out those individuals where you know you don't see eye to eye with and having an openly curious, non judgmental conversation with them is a
That's right.
fantastic way to challenge your own thinking and
Hmm.
also develop a lot of neuroplasticity, which is leads to more agility for as leadership and personal growth is concerned.
That's right. That's right. All everything that we need, and we know that when we look at the data, the research that talks about why employees are leaving their jobs and or what they're looking for when they don't feel included, when they don't feel valued, they are not staying, and they are not referring other talent
Mm-hmm.
to, and you get all this negative energy inside the organization. So it's
Right.
critically important, not just because it's the right thing to do, it's the right human thing to do because we care about
Mm-hmm.
each other deeply as human beings first and foremost.
That's exactly right. And moving into the quote unquote future of work, which is really interesting. People are talking about the new normal. There isn't one yet. We're still a
Never normal.
wildly evolving workplace. And
Never
as we're
normal.
moving forward, I'd have to say that community is one of the keys.
Hmm.
Developing an environment where people feel like they have indeed a community to lean in on
Yes.
is
Hmm.
is a game changer. In fact, research has been done years and years and years ago where people are 75% more likely to stay at a job, even with lower pay, if they enjoy who they work for and with.
That's right.
So,
We've seen that in the engagement research from Gallup for years and years and
mhm.
years. So it's been around a long time. We can count on the statements you
That's
just
right.
made.
Hasn't changed much.
Hmm.
And how are we going to do that, particularly in a very different, we have a little bit different needs now
Yeah.
and expectations, showing up in the
Hmm.
workforce,
That's right.
being able to, well, I'll just be blunt. We companies aren't going to quite be able to get away with the same approach
No, that's true.
as they have in the
That's
past.
so true. Hmm.
Mhm. Absolutely. Well, Vivian,
Yeah.
it's been such a big pleasure.
Thank
Let
you.
me know, any of you tuning in now or later, if you have any questions, you can always reach out to Vivian on LinkedIn or
Yes.
reach out to her at vivianblade.com. And I think you have another email too, or sorry, URL that was more
Yeah.
related to the scale model.
Right, influencewithscale.com. So if you want to go to influencewithscale.com or vivianblade.com, you can find more information about some of the resources, or just reach out to me. I'm glad to share some of the resources that I talked about today.
Yeah, it sounds fantastic, particularly the values guide and helping people understand, what value is it I bring to the
All right.
table, and how can I show up in that space. Well, again, such a pleasure.
Thank
Thank you for
you.
being on the
Thank
Career
you.
Coffee Chat show today, and as always, for everyone tuning in either now or later, my deepest wish for you, my friends, is to keep elevating. Until next time, bye for now.